Hi guys, welcome back to Trenches of Parenthood. Today's topic is going to be the impact of social media on parenting. I'm very excited about this topic because I think I was one of the people that got highly influenced and it definitely destroyed me. So I'm just very excited to talk about this. So let's get started. Let's start off by just saying the things that we typically see online that I think mess with us a whole lot. So the typical scenarios that we see online are very tidied up homes, monochromatic spaces. Typically it's like a beige color or a nature color, or you see maybe like parenting going to the fundamentals of making bread and making everything from scratch. You see kids being respectful. You see just everything positive. You see it online. And we consume that every single day. There's just these wonderful posts that people make that just, it just makes it seem like, oh my God, there's hope. We could be this. But I think also there's like an unrealistic framing there and an unrealistic perception of parenting, and it doesn't allow for experimenting. It just kind of says like, this is the way, and I feel like it almost like limits experimenting. Social media has like this, it's like a standard. I feel like social media has a standard of like how parents should be, based on how people choose to depict it. So most of the time we're getting the messages of like, you should be having your house clean all the time. Your house should be very beautifully decorated. You should be cooking from scratch. Like all these things that we were saying before, it's like, that's the image and that's the standard that they're setting, even though that's so like unrealistic. Who has those things? Like, it's unrealistic. It's not real. And we, especially when we're most vulnerable, we tend to believe that. And it's very, very harmful for us. So let me start off with some of the things that I consumed, and that was not a positive thing for me. When I first had my baby girl, I was trying to find like, what is the way I want to raise my daughter? What's my happy medium? What's my what do I want? And I think I started running a lot into these gentle parenting pages, right? Which I think had very great things. I definitely learned a whole lot of how I can handle certain situations. And I think it put certain things in perspective of like how I could respond, and where typically I will not know how to respond. So I think it gave me tools. Yes, it gave me tools. However, it kind of messed me up because it always had like, if you do this is how your kid is not going to respond. And my kid didn't really respond that way. It was different. It was just different. And every scenario that I saw, I was like, well, it didn't fully work out like that. Or, I don't know, like it keeps happening. Or it was just like certain things, it just didn't work for me. And so I think I started believing that I was a bad mom because sometimes I would lose it, and I just could not handle it, and I was like under so much stress that I just could not be gentle. Like I would scream. I would like have like an outrage. I don't know. And so I would put myself of like, I want to be this gentle parent, but it's just not working out like that. And it made me feel like I was a terrible parent because I did not fall exactly under this description. Slowly, I started kind of building my tool set. And that's when I was able to like, okay, this is just not realistic. Like if a person can do that the whole time, that is so great for them. But it just wasn't working for me. And I think that's the important part. We have to figure out what works for us. Like we can always choose to grow in a certain area, but that does not mean that we have to fit right underneath a certain description. every parenting style, it's like so different. You can parent in so many different ways. There is not one way to do things. And I didn't fully understand that at first. I think even if I heard it of like, oh yeah, we're trying and everything, like even if I heard those messages, I never fully accepted it because I was consuming so much of that social media that I grew to believe that that was the norm. I remember one time I saw an influencer actually that she mentioned that she had started with gentle parenting, and she literally mentioned everything that I was feeling. And then at some point she said, I've opted to do parts of it and then pick other tools from other learnings or teachings. And I could not have agreed more. And that was a time in where I was like, okay, so I'm sure, like if this person spoke out about this, I'm sure there are many parents out there that feel exactly the same, that maybe they just don't want to say it because, kind of like me, they didn't feel ready to because they didn't know that could be possible, or because it kind of feels a little bit shameful, right? Because we didn't know like that we are good parents. Is like you start doubting yourself, you start doubting what you're capable of. So it definitely impacted me a whole lot. But once I saw that influencer, I think it pushed my mentality to see a little bit outside. And it was like, no, a lot of people are feeling this, but they may just not say it for different reasons. So I wanted to share that because I know I see parents still trying to figure out their path, right? And like I said, there's so many different paths. I'm still trying to figure out my path. And so I think it's nice to hear from different people because you get different perspectives and then you can figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. For me, gentle parenting works to a certain extent. I have to have other resources for me to handle a situation if it doesn't work the way that gentle parenting wants me to do it. Like there are certain boundaries that I want to have that I didn't see possible fully with gentle parenting. There's a lot of things that gentle parenting teaches that are very good. It teaches you to take into account what your kid is feeling and have an appropriate response to it. And it teaches you about natural consequences. And I think there's so many great things there. And so I've taken a lot from that and I've learned and I've applied it as much as it applies to me and my family. There's a gray area there. And I think about this verb on the Bible. Okay. I'm going to read it because I don't remember it. So it's Proverbs 23:13-14. It says, do not withhold discipline from a child. If you punish them with the rod, they will not die. Punish them with the rod and save them from death. Now, I think a lot of people will interpret that differently. So I'm not okay with, let's say, hitting. Like, I'm not okay with hitting. However, for example, there was like this one time in where my daughter, when she was younger, she was, I think, 2. She kept putting her hand inside of the toilet. Like all the time, she kept putting it, and we said no. And she did understand the no. We would like take her away and we spoke to her and would tell her, no, we can't do this. It has germs, and we'll try to like do all those things prior to it. However, I got to some point that I was like, she was not listening. And it got to a point where I was like, this can actually get her sick. And so on that one, I did hit her hand because I'm like, I do not want you to do that. We've tried talking to you. We'll try showing you. And I'm like, a little spanking on your hand that to you means like, oh my God, this is so painful, even though it wasn't. That is kind of what I take as the rod, right? Like you have the little moments in where you do a little bit more to signify like you can no longer do this. This is not okay. And I think that is okay. And I've always thought that. And so I don't hit my kids like hard, but I do discipline them in certain areas where I'm like, we did all the steps. If those steps are not working, I will not continue to let you do this, because I want to make sure that I am disciplining you and you are doing the right thing. And if I just let you keep going, like eventually when you're an adult, it's going to get out of control. And I don't want that. And that's kind of like that second part of like punish them with the rod and save them from death. Like my thought is like you have to do that a little bit sometimes. Like you have to do something to make them stop. So when they are older, they know the big values. They know how to respect. They know what to do. Like they can now act as like active citizens of the world, and they can be good people. And that happens when they're little. And you have to discipline them when they're little. And that's just like my thoughts. It works for me. Like I'm not saying that anybody has to do this. Like obviously, like if you don't want to do it, that's totally fine. But I do think that there are certain aspects of discipline that I have chosen to do because it works for me, and it does not fit in a specific category of like, this is how you do it. And I think social media kind of hindered my thought process. I think it blurred my goals, my values. It just blurred how I wanted to handle any situation. So I think stepping away from social media, not necessarily social media, but stepping away from those pages helped me tremendously. So I actually just stopped following those pages. I made sure that none of those pages populated on my account, because I knew I was going to be in social media, but I knew that I didn't want to consume that. Because to me, they didn't add value to the way I wanted to discipline my children. And I had already learned everything I wanted to learn from those specific pages. At some point, once it starts to turn harmful in the terms of like, I am now doubting my skill, I am now doubting myself as a parent, I am now getting like a blurry vision on what I want, that to me was a sign that it is time to let go of those pages. And I had to look for other solutions, other pages that possibly could inspire me or make me feel empowered. The other page I think influenced me a lot was there was an eating page for toddlers. Now, if you watch my previous video, I spoke about how my mother-in-law had a lot of pressure on me, and my mom did as well. I want to say my mother-in-law was the heaviest on that one. But my mom and my mother-in-law did make comments a lot about how we didn't feed our kids, even though we did. They always questioned our habits when it came to food. When it came to food, I wanted them to have a really good relationship with it. So all the pages I followed was like, how do I introduce it? What do I do to get them to eat? Because, you know, when they are little, sometimes like they don't want to eat certain things. They don't like it. And so I wanted to know, like, how do I get you to eat vegetables? How do I get you to eat the right things? And I was struggling to figure that out. So I followed all these pages and I became very stressed out. So there was this one page that was like with weaning, food weaning. And hey, don't get me wrong, it had also really great tools, really great ideas. And I tried a few things. Some things worked, some things didn't. When things did not work, I felt like a failure. And I felt like my kids are just never going to do this. Like either I'm doing something wrong or something doesn't work. But I think most of the time I just blame myself. I blame myself for them not being able to eat. I blame myself because they didn't like something. I blame myself because of whatever strategy I decided to go with. I always blamed myself. I never blamed the page. I never blamed anything. It was just blaming myself. And so I think that was the harmful part. I should have celebrated my attempts. I should have celebrated the things that did work. But for some reason, my brain always went to the negative. So I realized, although the page had really good tips, really good comments, it wasn't helping me. I had tried to do some of those things, like I said, and they worked, and some didn't. But I, in general, didn't feel happy consuming the contents because it made me feel like a failure. So that was another page that I did stop following. And instead, I actually found this one page in where there's like she's a nutritionist, and she says some of the snacks that you can get, let's say at Costco or whatever. So some of the realistic snacks you can get for your kids, and they're very common, like the Cheez-Its, and like it's going off of things that are very real. And so that's one page where I was like, I need this page, because this page does not make me feel like a failure. I feel like I can do that. Like I could buy those snacks, and most likely my kids will eat that. There was also a time where like I would notice that my toddlers, like one day they would want to eat like everything, and another day it was like very minimal. They barely wanted to eat, and I was always worried. And so then I also saw that page, and she was explaining how that's literally how toddlers' bodies just work. Sometimes they want to eat everything, and sometimes they don't. And that really gave me a huge relief, because that was real, There was a lot of times where I'll follow like YouTubers, and they would show their kid like the day in the life of my kid eating, and they would eat like full course meals every single time. They have like a plate, and they'll finish the full plate. Then like an hour later, they'll have another meal, and they'll finish everything. And to me, I was like, my kid maybe will touch one thing in that plate. And so it was very traumatic. So I focused on finding pages that gave me realistic solutions, and I was able to find one of them. And I stuck with that one because it worked. It made me feel happy. I still follow her to this point because I think it just makes me feel like it's normal, versus the other ones made me feel like, no, it should not happen. Your kid should be doing every single thing that we're showing you, which was not real. I mean, granted, for some kids, I'm sure, like, listen, if your kid eats everything and eats like 6-7 times a day, and they eat everything, and they're, no problems with eating, then that's awesome. But unfortunately, not every kid is like that. And so consuming all those things just makes you feel like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? And so, yes, I chose to also unfollow those pages. And I followed one page that gave me realistic solutions. They gave me snack ideas that were simple to grab. And they gave me things that I felt capable of, and made me feel like I was real and my problems were real. So that was my solution. The other aspect of social media that I think it's crazy, because I'm like, so I have friends and I have family that have little kids. And in social media, you get to see their life, right? So you get to see how their kids are learning, how they're growing. And I think at first, whenever I saw kids that were either a similar age as Avery, and I saw them just doing more than my kids, I always tried to overcompensate, and I was like, let's do more. And so I'll try to find activities. I'll try to like do more to make sure that they're catching up to those kids. Now I have learned that, it's very hard for you not to compare yourself. Like it's very normal for you to compare yourself to other people, but it's what you do with the comparison that matters. So typically what I used to do is that in the comparison, I would try to overcompensate, and then my brain would go crazy, and I would typically crash at some point and not be able to keep up with that. And so it was just not effective. It sent me downhill. Now, when I do find myself comparing my kids to another kid, I tell myself a few things. So one thing, I tell myself my kids are unique. We all learn different things. We all learn at different pacings. The second thing I tell myself is like, this is a growing moment. This is a moment in where I have to ask questions so I can see how either I can incorporate this into my life, or if it's even doable for me. So I remember I have a friend, and I love her little kids are beautiful. So I have this friend in which she has a son, and her son, I've seen him like read like beautifully, And my daughter doesn't do that yet. And so I remember when I saw that, I did compare my daughter to him. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? Why is my daughter not reading? And why is he reading? And so instead of comparing and kind of messing up with my mental health, I was like, I need to ask her, because the point of this is like, I want to collaborate with other parents. Like, I want to learn. It's not just like you're a bad parent. No, you should be craving to learn. I think that's the biggest takeaway from me. I want to learn so I can know if I can implement something, or if there's any growth moments that I can take, rather than saying like, rather than overcompensating for something that I don't even know where it came from. Like, I don't know the full picture, right? And so I had asked her, and she told me what she had done and what had happened and how she came to that place with her son. And I was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Like, I really wish I had all those resources. Unfortunately, I didn't have those resources. I still don't have those resources. But I now have an idea of like, okay, she used this program to help him read. What can I use to help her read? And not putting her in the same position as him, right? Because I know there are different levels. And so to me, I'm like, how can I introduce this to her? How do I start helping her with this? Or how does this play a role also in her school? Like, how is everything connected? And so I've been able to found, after that conversation, I actually found the app that I spoke about, I think on the second episode. So the reading app for my daughter, and she loves the app, and she's having so much fun, and she's learning so much, and I'm very proud of her. And that, I would have never gotten to that point if I would not have asked her, what does she use? So I think for her, she used the ABC Mouse, I think was what she told me. And that was great, and that was like, I think that's a paid program, and I just can't afford that right now. So I went with a free program, which is on the phone, and it's been working very great for me. But like I said, I would have never gotten to that place if I wouldn't have asked. And that's the new mindset that I'm trying to put myself in, of like, you're always going to compare yourself to someone else, but it's what you do with it that matters. Like, if I'm going to compare and put myself down, that is not valuable. It doesn't do anything. However, if I compare and see how can I grow from this opportunity, maybe can I ask this person so I can also learn and possibly get better? That's the way I think it should work. Okay, the other thing I see online all the time, and I said it at the beginning, is having a very tidy home. I see this in a lot of influencers, okay? A lot of influencers have either a specific color that their house is set up as, and it's always clean. And it just makes everything look so nice and calm and peaceful. And it's just, and I always have to remember all the videos that are being put out and all the pictures that are being put out, those were posed. Like, the pictures, they posed for them. They chose the angle. They chose what they're going to show. Same thing for the videos. They're choosing what to show. I know that I also have to keep in mind that a lot of people that choose to do social media, that is their full job, right? Like, I have a full-time job, and then I come home, and then I do the rest of the things. And sometimes, after a full day of work, when you come back home, it's just very hard to do things sometimes because your energy is very low. And you also don't know how the mental health of everyone is, right? Now, we also don't know this for influencers. A lot of influencers are either going through it and they're just not showing you, or they may not be going through anything and they may be having a great life and they have time to tidy up their home because they get to be home the whole time. Or they get to choose where they are. Actually, let me change that. Versus if you're working a full-time job, and you come home and you're just low on energy and you have to make food and you have to do this and that and that. Sometimes you just don't have the energy for that. You just don't want to do it. Sometimes maybe you choose to have a little bit of time for yourself rather than cleaning. And that's normal. That's okay. And so whenever I see families online that have a very tidy home, the thing that I put in my head is I wonder what they're not showing. I wonder what they're actually feeling. And so I start putting those type of questions in my head rather than saying like, oh my God, look at those beautiful things, right? Like obviously when you see something beautiful, your head is going to be like, wow, that's pretty. And that's okay to acknowledge that. But I think also asking like, I wonder what they're actually feeling. I wonder what parts of their life they're not showing. I wonder how their life looks like behind the camera. And making them as real as possible, I think helps. However, I also think that if there is any content that you're consuming that makes you feel like you're a bad parent or that is putting you down, then that's a page that you do not want to be following because it's just not contributing to anything. It's important to know that some people can tidy up their house and have 6 kids because they're just wonderful at doing all these tasks together, or they've developed a habit that works for them. And there are some people that are still trying to figure it out, and some people that have mental health issues that just, it takes a lot of work to deal with. And so adding now on top of this, tidying the home, sometimes it just takes a lot. So I think giving yourself grace and knowing that you are unique, you have your own things to work with, you have to figure out your own pacing, you have to figure out your own habits, and you have to develop them over time. You just can't change them overnight. So if the goal is, say, I want to have my house tidy, right? Maybe you start by setting a goal of like, I want my house to be tidy by Friday night. And maybe break down the days and be like, on Monday, I'm just going to clean the kitchen. On Tuesday, I'm just going to clean the room. And so that's something that I've actually started doing, and I want to do it more purposefully because I wrote this calendar one time and it failed miserably. It did not work out. Now I think we're a little more consistent in cleaning. However, I'm trying to develop a habit of consistency with this podcast first. That's my first goal. And then I want to build a habit of consistency with cleaning certain areas. So this is to tell you that it is a work in progress, and you choose what your priority is, and you choose what the goals are for you, and you choose how you want to handle them. And although, like I said, comparing yourself is always going to happen, you want to use comparing in a positive manner. If you see someone that has really good habits with cleaning their home, maybe ask them, what do their habits look like? When do they have time to clean? How do they schedule out their day? And then you use whatever you can, whatever applies to you. You take it and then you apply it if it fits with what you want. So that's what has helped me. Making the influencer real in my head by asking further questions, setting my own goals and figuring out what works for me, and unfollowing any page that makes my mental health go down. And we're going to end with the last one that I see so many influencers do that I wish I could do more. But so there's a lot of times in where I see influencers just traveling the world. So great, so fun. And they do take their kid typically on most of their trips. At least the ones that I'm following, I see them taking their kids on trips all the time. So they'll take them to Disney. They'll take them to Japan. Who knows? They'll just take them everywhere. One, I do wish I could do that. That would be really nice. However, because I have limited amounts of money, I typically, whatever trip I can take, I want to take it with my husband. And the reason why is because we are with our kids all the time. We love their company. However, we have a few things in mind. So one, because they're little, we're like, they may remember this trip. They may also not remember this trip. And to us, because this stage is like so challenging, to us, we feel as if taking a trip for us will benefit us more because it'll keep us connected and it'll keep our foundation strong. So when we come back, our kids will feel our energy, and our energy will be more positive. It'll be more loving. And I think that's a beautiful thing, that whenever we are back from a trip, we can give so much more to them. However, because on social media, it's not what I typically see, I would actually sometimes feel terrible for taking those trips. But what I always remind myself is the aftermath of the trip. So although I still feel guilty every time I choose to have a trip with my husband, although the feelings are there, I accept the feelings, I feel them, and I try to let them go by remembering this is a good thing for you and your husband as a couple. And when we return, you will feel the energy change. The kids will feel the energy change. We will have a good moment together as a family. And you will feel refreshed, rejuvenated. You'll feel with more energy. And the great thing is that in my case, we do have my mom and my mother-in-law that help us so much. So whenever we do choose to do those trips, it's because they have agreed to help us out for a few days. And so the other thing that also helps me with that is knowing that they are with people that love them, and they're going to be very happy being there with them. So they're happy, we're going to be happy, and at the end it's going to be just great energy. So I remind myself of that often, so during the trips I don't feel guilty. Just because in social media I've seen a lot of people travel with their kids, and I don't think I'm there yet. I want to take my kids to travel a lot more, and we have taken them here and there, but it's not consistent. I'm hoping that in the future I can do that when they're a little bit older, but I know that that's just not where I am. And so that's the other thing of every time I'm looking at an influencer or anyone online, I have to sit back and realize, where am I in comparison to this person? So trying to figure out, what is the purpose of this trip? How does this impact everyone in my family? Where am I in comparison to whoever is sharing this information online? And also accepting that different people feel differently, right? Some people really value taking their kids to other countries because to them, it may signify something so much deeper, right? And so also understanding we all have very different mentalities, very different approaches, and they're all good approaches. So kind of validating that, and validating that whoever, like if you see an influencer doing something that you're not doing, she may just have a very different expectation than you do. She may have a different way of thinking. She may have a different value. She may love something so deeply because of some memory, or just in general, right? There's just different reasons why someone would do something. And so just realizing that because we're very different people, we want very different things, and that's okay. And it's great on both ends. Like, both ends are good. So if you choose to take your kids on multiple trips, that's beautiful. That's so great. And if you choose to not do that and you want to do it with your partner instead, that's also beautiful. That's also great. And so just acknowledging that we're all different. We're in different places. I think all of that has helped me. Is literally, I have a constant dialogue with myself to validate my feelings, see where I am, and how social media is going to interact with me. So to summarize, the things that have worked for me when it comes to social media is unfollowing pages that no longer serve me, seeking learning and growth at all times, aiming to make influencers more real by questioning the background, and putting my situation and their situation in perspective, and accepting that everyone is unique. Everyone has a different feeling, a different thought, a different approach. And it does not matter what they choose. because it is what works for them. Therefore, it's a good choice for them or for me. So accepting that, it's big. So those are the things that I've done to help me with this whole digital stage and all the things that we consume as parents. But in general, I think you should always embrace your true self. Embrace the messiness. Embrace the unfiltered reality of parenthood. And be your most authentic self. This is really what's going to bring us true happiness, and it's going to bring true happiness to our kids. Thank you so much for watching this, and I will see you next time. Bye.